I'm Patricia Greer, and I'm a tutor, actually a tutor emerita here at St. John, but I kind of never stopped teaching or working. And this Mahābhārata is my beloved book. This is just one of the 18, so. Okay, so snakes in the Mahābhārata. My talk today is about the Mahābhārata. That means that if you've never read it or read just some of it, you may well be disoriented. If that happens, just sit back and enjoy the stories and the pictures. The talk focuses on snakes, nagas in Sanskrit, and their role in the Mahābhārata. It will have many twists and turns. Taken apart, Maha means great, and Bharata is the traditional name of India. In India, people revere the Mahābhārata. Although the gigantic text is seldom read in full, its characters are family friends, known mainly through TV series, movies, condensations, novels, and comic books. Children are named for those characters: Arjuna, Krishna, Savitri. The Mahābhārata, as we have it, was completed probably in the 1st or 2nd century of the Common Era, although its origins stretch deep into earlier centuries. In its critical edition, the Mahābhārata's 18 books are close to 2 million words long, about 10 times the length of the Iliad and Odyssey combined. Its importance in world literature is difficult to measure. It's often compared to works of Shakespeare or the Bible. Its authorship traditionally is attributed to the great sage and ascetic Vyasa, who also acts as a central character in the work. However, it was most likely composed in the form we now have it by a group or family of brahmins around the turn of the Common Era, making liberal use of tales and sacred works of the past. The Mahābhārata's central story involves the cousins of 2 related royal families, the Kauravas and their cousins, the Pandavas. The 5 Pandava brothers are the main heroes, and they're protected by Krishna. Krishna is an incarnation or avatar of the god Vishnu, who takes birth from eon to eon when truth is in danger of utterly disappearing. The Mahābhārata takes place at such a moment in time. The early childhood competition between the Pandava and Kaurava cousins quickly turns to violent enmity, culminating in the Kurukshetra War, the central event of the Mahābhārata, in which almost all the warriors of the land are slaughtered, described in bloody detail. You may be familiar with the Bhagavad Gita, a conversation on the Kurukshetra battlefield between the warrior Arjuna, the most prominent of the 5 Pandava brothers, and his charioteer, Krishna. The Gita has been extracted from the epic as a sacred scripture on its own, although it is but one short part of one of the 18 books. That fact is a fine example of an assertion the text makes about itself. Quote, "Whatever is here may be found elsewhere. What is not here exists nowhere else." In other words, the Mahābhārata claims to contain everything. The Mahābhārata opens with a bard by the name of Ugrashravas, meaning he of formidable fame, arriving in a forest where a group of Brahmin priests are performing a 12-year ritual sacrifice. Brahmins are the highest of the 4 traditional classes. The second highest is the warrior class, to which most of the main characters belong. The priest asks Ugrashravas to recite, quote, the sublime histories he had heard recited at another sacrifice, the equally lengthy snake sacrifice offered by King Janamejaya, during which the entire Mahābhārata was recited aloud by another bard who had learned it from its creator, the sage Vyasa. To complicate things, the great epic has a great number of frames. Janamajaya's snake sacrifice snakes through, if you will, the Mahābhārata's entire narrative from book 1 through book 18. The bard Ugrashwabas begins. When all this was without light and unillumined, and on all sides covered by darkness, there arose one large egg, the inexhaustible seed of all creatures. They say that this was the great divine cause at the beginning of the eon. This egg lies below the cosmic waters in the kingdom of the Nagas, the divine and demonic snakes. Sanskrit has many words for snake, but Naga is used only for these uncanny magical creatures. Cobras, for existence, are from the genus Naga, and the word Naga is cognate with the English word snake. The bard continues. Here there is this egg, blazing as it were with its luster, which has been lying here in the water since the creation of the creatures without breaking or moving. I have never heard the tale of its birth or creation, and nobody knows its father or mother. They say that at the end of time, a vast fire will explode from it that burns down the entire universe. How fitting that the longest poem in the world, a poem that claims to contain everything, would begin with the enigma of the primordial egg, and that so much of the first of its 18 books, the Book of the Beginning, would focus on oviparous creatures, birds and reptiles, who were present at the creation of things, the churning of the ocean of milk, with sacred Mount Meru as the churning staff, and the gods and demons holding either end of the Naga Vasuki as the churning rope. You can see that there. From the milky ocean, the gods obtain the soma elixir that renders them immortal, and the snakes, by licking the grass upon which the soma had rested, obtain forked tongues and their own particular form of deathlessness. Indeed, the god Vishnu himself rides the heavens on the wings of a gigantic eagle, a voracious devourer of snakes. And when each of the countless eons comes to an end, Vishnu sleeps upon the coils of the sacred Naga Shesha. Let me say here that the Mahābhārata sees time as an endless cycle, described like this. Time ripens the creatures, time rots them, and time again puts out the time that burns down the creatures. Time unfolds all beings in the world, holy and unholy. Time shrinks them and expands them again. Time walks in all creatures, unaverted, impartial. Whatever beings there were in the past will be in the future. Whatever are busy now, they are all the creatures of time. Know it and do not lose your senses. In the Bhagavad Gita, when Arjuna asks Krishna, his charioteer and closest friend, and the divine incarnation, who he really is, Krishna replies, I am time, come for the destruction of the worlds. While birds are auspicious creatures of daylight, the snake moves at night, lives beneath the waters or in secret fissures. It's mysterious, magical, and frequently deadly. Nagas have been central to Indian mythology and religion since earliest times. When Alexander the Great was capturing cities in India, his historians reported that it was not unusual for him to find nearby a cave wherein dwelt a sacred snake that the people would entreat Alexander not to molest. When his army was marching past one of these caves, they heard hissing and gusts of rage so loud that all were terrified. The creature was over 100 feet long, they say, with eyes equal in size, quote, to the large round Macedonian shield. When Alexander occupied India's kingdom of Taxila in 326 BC, King Taxilas showed him an enormous serpent that the king nourished with great care and revered as a god. Another king in the region supposedly kept two huge snakes, one 130 feet and the other 70 feet long. It's said that this serpent god was, quote, from the similitude of his attributes, called Dionysos or Bacchus by the Greeks. The Sanskrit name of Alexander's Taxila is Takshashila, or the rock of Takshaka. Takshaka is the most important Naga in the epic. Thus, Takshaka's rock is the appropriate site for King Janamejaya's snake sacrifice, during which a bard recites the Mahābhārata. Arjuna and Krishna's sister are the great-grandparents of King Janamejaya. Janamejaya sponsors the snake sacrifice to avenge his father's death by the bite of Takshaka. More to come about that. This violent snake sacrifice, during which numberless snakes are consumed in the sacrificial flames, works as a kind of scaffolding for the Mahābhārata and has its roots in remote antiquity. Serpent worship was prevalent in Vedic times. The Vedas, India's most sacred texts, were orally composed between 1500 and 600 BCE. Vedic sacrifices typically lasted more than 12 days, often 61 or 100 days, and some as long as 12 years. But snakes were not thrown into the fire in the ancient rituals, for their main purpose was not to rid the world of snakes, but rather to attain immortality. Through this rite, says one hymn, the serpents overcame death. Those who perform it overcome death. They crawl out of their old skin, for they have conquered death. This is an important key to the snake's significance and its role in the Mahābhārata. The Naga holds the key to immortality. He or she can take human and animal forms, can interact, and even, as we shall see, mate with humans. The very first snake sacrifice is claimed to have been performed by the snakes themselves, who thereby gained their poison and became biters. India is, after all, the only country on earth home to all the known families of snakes. The Vedas tell the myth that surely inspired most subsequent snake lore and ritual, the contest between Indra, king of the gods, and a gigantic serpent or dragon. Indra slays the reptilian monster, and as it lies there like a broken reed, the sun, the sky, and dawn are born, the sacred Soma is won, and the swelling waters flow for mankind. Soma, essential in any Vedic ritual, is the so-called fiery juice that bestows immortality. It was pressed from a now extinct, possibly hallucinogenic plant or mushroom. Indra is frequently intoxicated by Soma. The Veda describes Indra's slain serpent as unawakened and fast asleep, like some embodiment of the unconscious. Thus, the purpose of Indra's heroic deed may not have been to slay the dragon snake so much as to awaken it. You, Indra, says one hymn, have performed the heroic deed. You aroused the sleeping serpent with your thunderbolt. The killing of unconsciousness or sleep then does not yield death, but wakefulness and consciousness. Has the serpent been slain, or has he simply shed his old skin? Casting off a snake skin is a frequent image in Sanskrit literature, always signifying a freeing from evil, a conquest of mundane existence, a winning of immortality. Says one text, the serpent smote away evil. Having smitten away evil, they lay aside their old worn-out skin and continue with a new one. Indra's victory over the serpent represents mankind's rebirth out of the enveloping grip in which the snake dragon holds the universe. The goal of the sacrifice is immortality. The site of that sacrifice, said to have been performed by the snakes themselves, took place, the text says, at Khandava. In the Mahābhārata, the vast Khandava forest is the setting of the final chapter of Book 1, the Book of the Beginning. In this disturbingly violent episode, Arjuna and Krishna burned down the Khandava forest in a holocaust of snakes and other forest creatures. The burning of the Khandava forest is a sort of grisly sacrificial ritual, a harbinger of the approaching Kurukshetra war. Quote, All over, the creatures were seen writhing on the ground with burning eyes, wings, and paws. When they jumped out, Arjuna cut them to pieces with his arrows and, laughing, threw them back into the blazing fire. Eyes blazing, tongues blazing, the big wide open maw blazing, the upright hair blazing, drinking up the fat of the living. The sacrificial fire feasted on the elixir that Krishna and Arjuna had fetched and became happy, sated, supremely blissful. Now, there are three interlocking story cycles in the book of the beginning, which are at first rather befuddling, seeming somehow extraneous to the central story. However, those three cycles, as is true of so much of the great Bharata, masterfully interlock. All three end with Janamejaya's snake sacrifice, triply emphasizing the central role of the Naga. The first cycle contains the mysterious adventure of Uttanka. Uttanka wants to give his guru a gift. The holy man tells him to go to the queen and request her earrings. When Uttanka ventures forth to obtain the jewels, he meets along the way, quote, an oversized man riding an oversized bull. Uttanka, eat the dung of my bull, commands the man. After a bit of persuading, Uttanka drinks the bull's dung and drinks its urine. Later, we'll discover what all this means. Shortly thereafter, he enters the chamber of the queen, who gives him her jewels with the warning, Takshika, the king of the snakes, wants to have these earrings. Please take care carrying them. Sure enough, as Uttanka carries away the jewels, he sees a naked mendicant who is alternately visible and invisible. When Uttanka puts the earrings on the ground to go for water, the predictable occurs. The supposed mendicant assumes his true form, the snake Takshika. And I guess it's hard to see here, but it's an old painting. You can see the snake and Uttanka in the water. Okay, so the mendicant is the snake Takshika. Takshika seizes the earrings and carries them through a fissure in the ground to the subterranean realm of the snakes. To appease the thief, Uttanka sings a long hymn in praise of snakes. In spite of the song, he doesn't receive the earrings. Then a handsome man comes along and offers Uttanka a boon. Uttanka demands, the snakes shall be in my power. The man replies, blow into this horse's ass. When Uttanka blows, the horse belches fire and smoke from all its orifices, terrifying the snakes. Takshika hurriedly hands over the stolen goods. Uttanka presents them to his guru, who explains Uttanka's encounters. The handsome man is the rain god. The fire-belching horse is the fire god. The bull is the king of snakes, and the man who rides him is the god Indra. The bull's dung is the elixir of immortality, which is why Uttanka did not die in the dwelling of the snakes. Uttanka thirsts to wreak vengeance upon Takshika. He goes to King Janamejaya, who is a performer of the snake sacrifice, and tells him that he must discharge the king's debt to Janamejaya's dead father, who, says Uttanka, was murdered from the bite of this corrupt Takshika, who waylaid me evilly. You, Grand King, must burn this heinous snake in the blazing offering fire at a snake sacrifice. So without Takshika, there might never have been a Mahābhārata. It's for Takshika's destruction that the snake sacrifice is performed, during which the Mahābhārata is recited. The two other cycles also end with the snake sacrifice. This third describes the sacrifice in vivid detail in verses so like those used for the burning of the Kandava forest. The snakes began to drop into the blazing flames, writhing and wretched and crying out to one another. They darted and hissed and wildly coiled about with tails and heads as they fell into the radiant fire. white, black, blue, old and young, screeching, terrifying screams. They fell into the high, blazing flames. Hundreds of thousands and millions and tens of millions of the snakes died, powerless, some like tiny mice, others fat like elephant trunks, or huge and strong like rutting bull elephants. All sorts of them in vast numbers, many-colored, poisonous and loathsome, mordacious and powerful, they fell into the fire. However, Takshaka, the very Naga for whose destruction the sacrifice supposedly is being performed, the most wanted of all snakes for her murder of King Janamajaya's father, which we'll hear about, has sought refuge with the god Indra, king of the gods. Indra hides the Naga in his elaborate skirts, but the power of the ritual is inexorable, and both the snake and Indra feel themselves drawn down into the sacrificial fire. At last, Takshaka falls from Indra's skirts, facing imminent death. As he's falling, a young Brahmin arrives and demands a boon, that the snake sacrifice be stopped. The request cannot be refused. The fall of the mightiest Naga is arrested in midair. Space-time is frozen. Takshaka is saved. But there's much space and time to cover before the end. So our bard of formidable fame backs up. Once upon another time, he continues, and launches into the tale that explains in detail why Takshaka bit King Janamajaya's father in the first place. If these chronological leaps seem confusing, let me assure you that I'm making it as straightforward as possible. In the original, space-time leaps are far snakier. One day a king, Janamajaya's father, thus Arjuna's grandson, goes out hunting and loses his prey, an evil omen. Coming upon a hermit sitting in meditation, the king asks him if he's seen the fleeing deer. When the hermit, under a vow of silence, fails to answer, the furious king throws a dead snake around the ascetic's neck. The hermit's son comes upon his father draped with a dead reptile and curses the perpetrator of this indignity to be dispatched by the mordacious snake, Takshaka, into the kingdom of the Lord of Death. The king does all within his power to protect himself from the curse, but Takshaka, with his magical Naga ability to change form, hides as a worm inside an apple. And as the king opens wide to bite into it, Takshaka emerges and sinks his fangs into the king's throat. Takshaka's venom swiftly fells the proud king who, quote, was still laughing when Takshaka coiled around him. When Prince Janamejaya hears the account of the murder, he determines to perform a snake sacrifice, the purpose of eradicating the entire serpent race. From Takshaka's point of view, however, the king's death was well-deserved, and not solely for the insult done to the dead snake. As might be said for so much of the Bharata story, it all began generations earlier in the horrific burning of the Khandava forest. Herein lies Takshaka's primary motive for killing the progeny of Arjuna. Let me insert here that the confusing but masterful interlocking of events, past and future, aimed toward one goal, is for me one sign of the overall textual integrity of the epic. The burning of the Khandava forest and Janamajaya's snake sacrifice bracket the book of the beginning, alerting us to the ritual transformations that define the Mahābhārata and emphasizing the themes of snake as sacrifice and sacrifice as apocalypse. In that grand battle, says the bard, describing the burning of the forest, miraculous portents were witnessed that equaled those at the end of the eon and prophesizing the extermination of all living creatures. The Khandava burning is a harbinger of the violent events to come in the climactic Kurukshetra war. As you'll recall, Arjuna and Krishna are together in the forest when the fire god Agni asks them for something satisfying to eat. He wants to endow the entire Khandava But he says the god Indra protects it because it's the home of Indra's friend, the Naga Takshika. Thus it comes about that in the Khandava forest, cited the very first snake sacrifice in hoary Vedic times, is Janamejai's great-grandfather, Arjuna, who performs the rites, offering the forest creatures and snakes into the blazing, wide-open maw of the god of fire. Again, Indra, special friend of Takshika, tries to protect the snakes. One irony here is that Arjuna's divine father is Indra. So in burning the forest, Arjuna is openly defying his divine progenitor. Takshika's home is in this Khandava forest, but on the day of its immolation, he's away, at Kurukshetra no less. However, Takshika's wife and son, Ashvasena, are there. The terrified mother attempts to save her son by swallowing him. Unmoved by her self-sacrifice, Arjuna beheads her. Indra stuns Arjuna long enough for Ashvasena to leap from his mother's severed body and escape. Arjuna, Krishna, and Agni are furious. They curse Ashvasena, "You shall never find shelter." That curse will be fulfilled on the Kurukshetra battlefield. The Naga Ashvasena reappears on the battlefield as a peculiar kind of sacrificial victim. At the onset of the mortal combat between Arjuna and his eldest brother, Karna, who's allied with Arjuna's enemies, the snake Ashvasena rises up from the lower regions and enters Karna's quiver in the form of an arrow, hoping to avenge his mother's beheading. Karna aims the arrow with the intention of cutting off Arjuna's head. Krishna, Arjuna's divine charioteer, sees the deadly Naga approaching and presses down on the chariot, causing it to sink into the muddy battlefield. The snaky weapon, as it is called, only pierces Arjuna's diadem, a gorgeous affair given to him by his divine father Indra, and it falls down on the earth like the blazing disk of the sun. Ashvasena pleads with Karna to shoot him again as a snake arrow, but Karna refuses. Shelterless, as Krishna and Arjuna had cursed him to be, Ashvasena prepares to attack Arjuna on his own. Krishna urgently reminds Arjuna of the long ago massacre in the Khandava forest and of Ashvasena's ample motive for vengeance, the decapitation of his snake mother. Arjuna quickly kills the menacing Naga, who has found, as Arjuna had predicted, no place to seek refuge. So Naga King Takshika harbors an abiding hatred for Arjuna, who decapitated both his mother and his son. He will find vengeance 2 generations later by sinking his fangs into the neck of Arjuna's grandson. What's the meaning of Ashvasena's sacrifice? Arjuna's diadem, pierced by the Naga, stands in, as it were, for Arjuna's head. The diadem absorbs the fatal blow that Karna, the single archer superior to Arjuna, might have administered. Ashvasena is sacrificed that Arjuna may live. Shortly after killing Ashvasena, Arjuna, again with the help of Krishna, beheads his brother Karna. The scene mirrors the previous fight. Now it's Karna's chariot that faithfully sinks into the mud. At Krishna's behest, violating all sacred rules of warfare, Arjuna releases his arrow and Karna's head falls like the sun, a bloody disk, as Arjuna's diadem had fallen like the blazing disk of the sun. The use of nearly identical language to describe the fall of Arjuna's crown and the fall of Karna's head mirrors the significance of the sacrifice of the Naga Ashvasena, for Ashvasena's mother had lost her own head in an act of self-sacrifice, whereby her son was saved. One of the most interesting anomalies of the bizarre episode of the burning of the Khandava is the antagonism between Indra and Arjuna, son against father, human self against divine self. Arjuna plays serpent slayer in defense of his father, the serpent protector, a situation mirrored when Janamejaya attempts to burn all the snakes in his sacrificial fire, and Takshika hides in Indra's skirts. And the Khandava forest, when a disembodied voice tells Indra that his friend Takshika has escaped, Indra retreats, and the slaughter runs its bloody course until the forest with almost all its creatures is sped to Agni, god of fire. Now let's turn to another Naga. The Naga first praised in Uttanka's hymn to the snakes, the guy who blew into the horse's ass and all, is old Airavata. Airavata means produced from the ocean, and it happens also to be the name of Indra's white elephant that was produced when gods and demons churned the ocean of milk using the serpent Vasuki as churning rope. Exploring the coincidence of snake and elephant exposes further layers in the intriguing relationship of Indra and the Naga. When Uttanka's guru gives him the occult key to the many remarkable things he's done and seen in his pursuit of the queen's earrings, he tells him that the bull whose dung is the elixir of immortality was none other than Airavata, the age-old king of snakes. Now, the Sanskrit word Naga can also mean elephant. It seems likely that the original meaning was snake, and it's not difficult to imagine that the snake became associated with the elephant's trunk. In the ancient Vedic fire rituals, oblations are made to the snakes associated with the four directions. In later literature, however, the guardians of the quarters have become elephants. So in Vedic times, the four quarters were protected by great snakes, who in the course of the ages became elephants. Later iconography depicts Indra riding a snake-like elephant. Evidently, such stories reflect a mythic transition when serpent upholders of the cosmos were on their way to becoming elephant guardians. We begin to get an inkling why in the story of Uttanka, the Airavata Indra rides is a Naga, albeit a Naga disguised as a bull, whose excrement is the sacred Soma. The Rig Veda refers to Soma as, quote, the bull who rules over the rain, which is pissed down from the clouds. The image of Indra riding a pissing serpent bull represents a transformation of Indra from arrogant, Soma-intoxicated serpent slayer to the friend and protector of snakes. The very central importance of Airavata in the Mahābhārata, his function as a link between Vedic ritualized myth and the Mahābhārata's narrativized ritual, is made clear by his role as ancestor of two very important Naga women and their encounters with Arjuna, erotic relationships whose defining terms are not antagonism and fear, but kinship, love, and sacrifice. Significantly, these relations are forged during Arjuna's two journeys to the four quarters of Greater India. During these wanderings, Arjuna begets two very special snake sons. Yes, Arjuna makes love with Nagas. Arjuna's first sojourn is a self-imposed exile. He has broken a brotherly compact by disturbing his eldest brother when he is, quote, taking his turn, as the text chastely says, with Draupadi, the common wife of all five Pandava brothers. After Arjuna sets forth, he enters the Ganges for a purifying bath. A Naga princess rises out of the river, seizes the handsome warrior, and carries him to her kingdom beneath the waters. Arjuna asks her to introduce herself. There's a snake sprung from the lineage of Airavata, she says, and I am his daughter, Ulupi. Make me happy today, she pleads. Love me who love you. Arjuna consents. The child born of their union, Airavat, will be the sacrificial victim that saves the armies of Arjuna and its brothers in the Kurukshetra war. Shortly before the war begins, Airavat presents himself to his father. Delighted, Arjuna requests his snake son to assist at the approaching battle. Accordingly, Airavat is present at Kurukshetra. Early on, Iravath kills some important warriors. The enemies conjure a fantastic monster to fight him. The monster employs all its powers of illusion. It creates 1,000 formidable warriors. Warriors. Sorry, it was a slip. 1,000 formidable lawyers, but Iravath defeats them all. Iravath uses his own magic powers. He invokes great numbers of serpents to cover the monster's body, but it morphs into an eagle and eats them all. When Iravath sees his fellow snakes swallowed, he's confounded. The monster seizes that opportunity to cut off Iravath's head, described as graced with a diadem and looking beautiful like a lotus or the moon. Words so like those used to describe Arjuna's diadem and Karna's head. Arjuna's snake son is the very first of the Pandava warriors to die. Shortly after Iravath is killed, says the text, the warriors by thousands poured out their lives as libations on the sacrificial fire of battle, slaughtering one another. Iravath's sacrifice serves to protect the Pandavas from defeat by their Kaurava cousins. Even today, in some South Indian temples, the head of a snake attached to a body made of straw is kept in the temple sanctuary. During an annual festival honoring the death of Iravath, the snake's head is cut from the straw body as a ritual reenactment of his long ago self-sacrifice. Before I proceed, I can't resist telling the story of one of lusty Arjuna's less elaborate reptilian encounters. During his wanderings, Arjuna comes upon 5 reptiles, here crocodiles, who turn out to be 5 erotic nymphs under a curse. We're not told precisely what it is that Arjuna does, except that in response to their pleas, he happily and mightily delivers the 5 reptiles from the curse, changing the scaly beast back into nymphs of blazing beauty. Now let's go on to Arjuna's second snaky wife and their son. First, a little digression, another one. In 1776, a certain Mr. Mott of the British Raj visited the Indian state of Orissa to see, as had Alexander the Great, a great snake that supposedly had been worshipped there since the world began. Mr. Mott claims to have watched it emerge from its cave, as it did every 7th day, and eat the offering of a goat provided by the snake's worshippers. From the marks it left in the mud, Mr. Mott estimated its diameter to have been 2 feet. 60 years later, another inquiring Britisher visited the spot and reported that the snake was still alive. In a nearby kingdom, the god worshipped by the royal family was a particular species of naga from which the royal family claimed descent. The Maharajas claimed to be descendants of snakes. That very place, Manalore, in the modern Indian state of Orissa, is a stronghold even today of the self-styled Naga clan. Nowadays, the Nagas have thoroughly human forms. Manalore, says the Mahābhārata, is where Arjuna loves another Naga princess. After his amorous encounter with Uluti in the waters of the river Ganges, engendering Iravath, Arjuna travels down the ocean coast to Manalore, where he spies the kingdom's buxom princess and asks the king for her hand. The king assents on condition that Arjuna begets upon the girl a male child. Arjuna stays for 3 months before journeying on, leaving the princess pregnant with Mahābhārata. It will be many years before Arjuna's second Naga son can fulfill the sacrificial role for which he was born. Arjuna meets Mahābhārata at the end of the Kurukshetra war. Once again, Arjuna has set out on a circumambulation of India. To celebrate their victory in the war, the Pandavas perform a grand horse sacrifice. Wherever the horse wanders, the people there have to defend their land or lose it to the initiator of the ritual. Eventually, the horse leads Arjuna back to Manalura. His son is now king there and comes forth to meet his father with hospitality and humility. Arjuna is furious. In the antagonistic contest of a horse sacrifice, such humble behavior is not proper for a warrior. Arjuna has come to defeat the country where the horse has wandered, and Babhuvahana, by the warrior's code, must fight him. When King Babhuvahana demurs, Arjuna grows even more angry and insulting. Hidden beneath the earth, Arjuna's first snake wife, Ulupi, is listening to the bitter exchange and suddenly emerges from a fissure in the ground. She insists that Babhuvahana take up Arjuna's challenge, for which she promises he will gain great merit. Babhuvahana relents. The fight of Arjuna and his son is described in violent detail. Snake imagery is everywhere. Babhuvahana's arrows resemble snakes of virulent poison. They penetrate Arjuna's body like a snake penetrating an anthill, causing him great pain. At last, Arjuna dies. He collapses on the ground. Arjuna is dead. Horrified, the son swoons from grief. His enraged mother holds her fellow snake wife Ulupi responsible for the tragedy. Arjuna has died through you by my son, she wails. Babhuvahana regains consciousness and vows to starve himself to death. Quite a fraught scene. As mother and son weep over the corpse of husband and father, Ulupi, the snake wife, thinks of the magical gem of the Nagas that holds the power of restoring the dead to life. That jewel, called the great refuge of the snakes, reminds us of the jewel-like markings on the hood of the cobra. Thus thought of, the jewel appears to Babhuvahana, who places it upon his slain father's chest. Arjuna awakens as if from a deep sleep. The heavens rejoice, raining flowers, and Arjuna, looking around in amazement, waxes poetic. Why is it that everything in the field of battle seems to bear the indications of grief, wonder, and joy? A grateful Arjuna sets out again in pursuit of the horse and the expansion of his kingdom. In this final great ritual, the Mahābhārata, the horse sacrifice, the cosmic contest of snakes and divinities that began in Vedic tales comes full circle. The serpent bites its tail. Arjuna has battled a snake who is in truth his own son, his own self, has been defeated, has died, has touched the secret stone of immortality and shed his old skin. In Vedic ritual, the sacrificer always must pass through symbolic death. The Mahābhārata affirms again and again from its ritual framework and into its deepest layers that it is the serpent, the deadly Naga, who knows the secrets of sacrifice and of immortality. At the end of the Mahābhārata, like a great Naga, it coils back upon itself. After 2 million words and 100,000 verse couplets, this gigantic, magnificent, and certainly complex epic poem, in its final 18th book, closes with the last moment of the snake sacrifice that has provided the occasion for the recital of the Mahābhārata. Toxicus fall from Indra's skirts into the voracious snake-fed fire is arrested in midair. Time, the time that puts out the time that burns down the creatures, has frozen. The Mahābhārata thus asserts that it really has no ending. Men and gods can only imitate the endless coilings through space and time and the endless rebirths of the divine snakes. Thank you.